Welcome to my channel, HFY Story Hub. The alien child was seconds away from freezing to death when the human opened the station airlock. Every warning alarm screamed through docking ring 9. Red emergency lights flashed across the corridor. The pressure seal had already failed. Frost spread over the metal walls like growing veins of ice. And in the middle of it all, a little blue-skinned girl clung to her unconscious brother while oxygen leaked from the station into open space. Nobody moved. Not the guards. Not the merchants. Not even the station medics. Because the children were Vakari. And every species in the galaxy feared the Vakari. Then the humans stepped forward. "You'll die if you open that door," someone shouted. Elias Mercer ignored them. The old cargo mechanic grabbed the emergency handle with both hands. Muscles strained under his oil-stained jacket. The freezing wind already tore through the cracks around the damaged seal. The girl looked up at him with terrified silver eyes. "Please," she whispered weakly. "Help my brother." The corridor shook violently. Warning sirens howled louder. Someone screamed, "Human, stop!" Elias pulled the lever anyway. The airlock exploded open. A brutal wave of freezing vacuum slammed into him like a truck. The station lights flickered. Loose metal containers flew past his head. His boots scraped across the floor as decompression tried to drag him into space. But Elias kept moving. One step. Then another. Blood vessels burst across his eyes from the pressure change. Ice formed instantly on his beard. His fingers turned pale blue as he reached the children. The alien boy wasn't breathing. Elias ripped off his own oxygen mask and forced it onto the child's face. The entire corridor went silent. Even the guards stared in disbelief. No species removed breathing protection during decompression. No sane person would. But the human wrapped both children in his arms and dragged them back through the storm of escaping air while his own lungs slowly collapsed. The emergency shutters finally slammed shut. The corridor sealed. Elias hit the floor hard, coughing blood onto the metal. For several seconds nobody moved. Then the little girl suddenly grabbed his sleeve. "Why?" she asked, trembling. "Why would you save us?" Elias struggled to breathe. "Because you're kids." The station guards exchanged nervous looks. One of them stepped closer carefully. "Human, do you even know what they are?" Elias looked down at the frightened children. "No," he said. "And I don't care." That answer terrified them even more. Because everyone knew the stories about the Vakari. The war fleets. The executions. The empire that burned entire moons for disobedience. For 20 years, the Vakari Dominion ruled through fear. And now 2 Vakari children sat inside the rusting maintenance station known as Outpost K-17, eating warm human soup beside an old mechanic. The galaxy would not believe it. Hours later, Elias sat quietly inside his tiny repair shop while the children devoured bowl after bowl of food like starving animals. Rain from the station condensers tapped softly against the overhead pipes. The little girl finally slowed down. "My name is Lyra," she said carefully. She pointed to the boy sleeping under a blanket beside the heater. "And that's Kale." Elias nodded while repairing a broken drone part. "I'm Elias." Lyra studied him nervously. "You really don't know who we are." "I know you're hungry," he replied. "That's enough." The girl looked confused by that answer. Most species treated Vakari with fear the moment they saw silver eyes. Even adults crossed corridors to avoid them. But this human spoke to them normally. Like they mattered. Like they were safe. A loud metallic knock suddenly echoed through the station door. Everyone froze. 3 armored security officers entered the shop with plasma rifles raised. Their leader, a tall insect-like Kareth officer, stared directly at the children. "There they are." Lyra immediately pulled Kale behind her. Fear filled her face. The officer activated his wrist scanner. By order of the Galactic Council, the Vakari heirs are to be taken into custody immediately. Elias slowly stood up. "Heirs." The officer finally looked at him. "Human. Step aside." Kale woke suddenly, panic flooding his face. "No," the boy whispered. "Please don't send us back." The officer raised his weapon slightly. Those children are classified as interstellar threats. Elias frowned. Threats. They're kids. You understand nothing, the officer snapped. Their mother has slaughtered millions. The room went cold. Lyra lowered her head silently. And for the first time, Elias saw shame in her eyes. Not arrogance. Not cruelty. Shame. The Kareth officer moved forward. Then Elias stepped between them. Every guard stopped. You're protecting them? The officer asked in disbelief. Elias crossed his arms slowly. You said their mother hurt people. Not them. The officer's mandibles twitched with anger. Human stupidity never fails to amaze me. One guard aimed directly at Lyra. Cale started crying. And something inside Elias changed. Maybe it was the fear in the children's faces. Maybe it was the memory of his own daughter who died years ago during the mining wars. Or maybe humans simply had a survival instinct the galaxy never understood. Because Elias grabbed a plasma welding torch from his workbench and pointed it directly at the armed officers. The guards burst into laughter. One tiny human mechanic standing against trained soldiers. Pathetic. Until the Kareth officer noticed Elias wasn't shaking. Not even slightly. Humans are different, the officer suddenly realized. The human was afraid. But he was stepping forward anyway. Then the station lights suddenly died. Darkness swallowed the corridor. A deep alarm echoed across the entire outpost. Docking alert. Unauthorized warship approaching. The officers activated emergency scanners. And instantly, their faces turned white. Outside the viewport, something enormous emerged from hyperspace. A black Vakari dreadnought. Big enough to blot out the stars. And at its center burned the symbol feared across the galaxy. The Crimson Crown. Lyra whispered only 3 words. Mother found us. The Vakari dreadnought fired one warning shot, and the entire moon beneath Outpost K-17 cracked open. The station trembled violently. Lights exploded overhead. Panic spread through the corridors as civilians screamed and rushed toward escape pods. Outside the viewport, the massive black warship hovered like a god of death, its crimson engines illuminating space itself. The galactic officers inside Elias's repair shop stopped laughing immediately. One of them whispered in horror, "The Crimson Queen!" Cale buried his face into Elias's jacket. Lyra's hands trembled. "She came herself," the girl whispered. "That's bad." The Kareth commander activated his communicator frantically. "This is Officer Telvek requesting immediate fleet support." "Repeat." The transmission died instantly. Every screen in the station turned black. Then a woman's voice echoed through every speaker. Cold. Calm. Terrifying. "You have my children." Silence consumed the station. Even the guards looked afraid to breathe. The voice continued. "Return them unharmed, and you may live." One of the younger officers panicked and grabbed Lyra violently by the arm. "We use them as leverage." The little girl cried out in pain. And Elias moved before thinking. His fist smashed into the officer's jaw so hard the alien crashed across the room into a steel shelf. Everyone froze. Even Elias looked surprised at himself. The Kareth commander raised his weapon instantly. "Human! Stand down!" Elias stepped in front of the children again, chest rising heavily. "Don't touch them. You just assaulted galactic security." "He hurt a kid." The officer stared at him like he was insane. Outside, the dreadnought slowly rotated. Thousands of hidden weapons emerged from its dark armor. Targeting systems. Missile ports. Planet-killer cannons. The entire station suddenly understood one horrible truth. The Vakari fleet was not negotiating. A second transmission came through. This time the voice sounded different. Not cold. Furious. "If my daughter is crying," the woman whispered, "this station dies first." People began screaming in the distant corridors. Escape pods launched desperately from the station like insects fleeing fire. Officer Telvek looked at Elias. "You don't understand what's happening. Her name is Seraphine Vey. She ended the Crothan War in 6 hours. Another officer spoke nervously. She executed an entire royal senate on live broadcast. She burned a rebel fleet while their surrender signals were active. Lyra suddenly shouted, "Stop talking about her like that!" Tears filled her silver eyes. "She's not a monster." Nobody answered, because deep down, they all believed she was. Cale tugged weakly on Elias's sleeve. "She only gets scary when people hurt us." The boy's voice was so small, so innocent. Elias looked at the terrified children beside him, then at the warship outside. And for the first time, doubt entered his mind. Who exactly had he rescued? Suddenly, the station doors exploded inward. Smoke filled the room. Black armored soldiers stormed through the entrance with perfect precision, weapons glowing red. Vakari Royal Guard. Every galactic officer instantly dropped their rifles. Nobody fought the Royal Guard and survived. A tall figure entered slowly behind them. A woman dressed in dark silver armor. Long white hair flowed behind her like smoke. A scar crossed one side of her face. Her silver eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. Commander Seraphine Vey. The Crimson Queen herself. The room felt smaller the moment she entered. Heavier. Like gravity bent around her anger. Her gaze locked instantly onto the children. Everything else disappeared. Lyra ran first. "Mom!" Seraphine dropped to her knees and caught both children in her arms. For one brief moment, the terrifying warlord vanished. Now she was only a mother. She held them so tightly her hands shook. "I looked everywhere," she whispered painfully. "Everywhere." Cale started crying against her shoulder. "We thought you died." Seraphine closed her eyes. And Elias noticed something shocking. Tears. The woman feared across entire star systems was crying silently while holding her children. One royal guard approached carefully. "My queen, the station governor requests." Later. Her voice instantly became ice again. The soldier stepped back immediately. Then Seraphine slowly stood. Her eyes moved toward the injured galactic officer lying on the floor. "Who touched my daughter?" Nobody spoke. Fear paralyzed the room. The officer tried to stand shakily. "My queen, I..." Seraphine drew her weapon faster than human eyes could follow. A black energy blade ignited with a violent scream. The room temperature dropped instantly. Officer Telvek panicked. "Wait." He was following protocol. Seraphine ignored him completely. The officer stumbled backward, horrified. Then Elias suddenly stepped between them. Everyone stopped breathing. Even the royal guards looked stunned. The human mechanic was standing in front of a Vakari execution blade. Seraphine stared at him silently. "You protect him?" she asked. Elias swallowed hard. "He's scared." The queen's expression darkened. "He hurt my child. And killing him won't help yours." The room became deathly silent. Nobody had spoken to Seraphine Vey like this in years. Maybe ever. One wrong word could trigger a massacre. But Elias stood his ground anyway, despite the blade inches from his chest. His hands trembled. His breathing shook. But he did not move. Seraphine studied him carefully. And for the first time in a very long time, confusion crossed her face. Humans are different, she realized. Any other species would beg. This one protected strangers while standing before death itself. Finally, slowly, the queen lowered her blade. The entire room exhaled at once. Then alarms suddenly screamed across the dreadnought outside. One of the royal guards touched his helmet urgently. "My queen, multiple unidentified ships just exited hyperspace." The soldier's voice changed. Fear entered it. A Dominion assassination fleet. Seraphine's face went completely still. Lyra looked terrified. "They found us." Elias frowned. "Who found you?" But nobody answered. Because outside the station window, 12 black warships surrounded the moon. And every single one carried the same message across open frequencies. "Deliver the royal children, or the human dies first." The assassination fleet opened fire before the station could even sound the next alarm. Space itself erupted into white light. Explosions thundered across the moon's surface as black warships surrounded Outpost K-17 like wolves circling prey. Entire docking platforms vanished in seconds. Escape pods trying to flee were vaporized instantly. Inside the repair station, everyone froze as the viewport cracked from the shockwave. Kale screamed. Lyra grabbed Elias's arm. And Commander Seraphine Vey slowly turned toward the stars with murder in her eyes. "They came for my children," she whispered. One of her royal guards spoke urgently. "My queen, we must evacuate immediately." "No." The single word silenced everyone. The guard hesitated. "But the station is full of civilians." Seraphine's glowing eyes narrowed. "If I leave now, the fleet will destroy this moon to erase all witnesses." Officer Telvek looked horrified. "You think they'd slaughter millions?" Seraphine faced him coldly. "You still believe this is politics?" Then she pointed toward the warships outside. "That fleet belongs to House Verex. They murdered my husband during peace negotiations. They poisoned half the Imperial Council. And now they want my children dead before sunrise." The room fell silent. Lyra lowered her head. Kale clung tighter to Elias. The little boy whispered, "They've been chasing us for months." Elias looked down at him carefully. "Why?" Seraphine answered instead. "Because my children carry something the galaxy cannot control." Before Elias could ask, the entire station suddenly lurched sideways. The lights died again. Emergency power flickered weakly red across the room. Then came the sound. Metal tearing apart somewhere deep below them. One royal guard checked his scanner and went pale. Direct hit on the reactor level. Another explosion shook the station violently. This one closer. Civilian screams echoed through the corridor outside. Elias reacted instantly. "There are still families in the lower sectors." "We don't have time," Telvek snapped. "The station is collapsing." Elias grabbed his jacket and emergency toolkit. Seraphine frowned. "Where are you going?" "To help them." The Queen stared at him in disbelief. "The reactor breach will kill you." "Then I better move fast." He started toward the corridor. And suddenly Seraphine grabbed his wrist. Her hand was cold. Stronger than steel. "You would risk your life for strangers?" Elias looked at her like the answer was obvious. "They need help." For a moment, Seraphine said nothing. No calculation. No strategy. Just confusion. Because in all her years commanding fleets and surviving betrayals, she had never understood humans. Their wars were primitive. Their technology outdated. Their species divided and emotional. And yet, they walked willingly into death for people they didn't even know. Humans are different, she thought again. Then another explosion rocked the station. Elias pulled free and ran into the corridor. Lyra suddenly shouted, "Wait!" Everyone turned. The little girl stepped beside Elias nervously. "I'm coming too." "Absolutely not," Seraphine snapped instantly. "But people are trapped." "You are not leaving my side again." Lyra's silver eyes filled with tears. "Mom, please." Seraphine froze. For one painful second, the feared Crimson Queen looked helpless. Kale spoke quietly. "Dad would have helped them." That sentence hit harder than any weapon. Seraphine closed her eyes briefly. Pain crossed her face like an old wound reopening. Finally, she looked at Elias. "Protect them." Before he could answer, she unclipped a small black device from her armor and pressed it into his hand. A Vakari military beacon. "My guards will track this signal," she said quietly. "If you are cornered, activate it." Elias nodded once. Then he, Lyra, and Kale disappeared into the smoke-filled corridors. The lower sectors looked like hell. Fire spread across collapsed walkways. Oxygen leaked from ruptured pipes. Families screamed for help beneath fallen debris while emergency sirens echoed endlessly through the darkness. Elias moved without hesitation. He lifted broken steel beams with bleeding hands. He crawled through burning maintenance shafts. He carried injured strangers across collapsing bridges while explosions shook the station around them. and the alien civilians watched him with growing disbelief. A human, one of the weakest species in known space, running toward danger again and again while everyone else fled. At one point, a shattered support column trapped 3 children beneath it. Even Elias couldn't lift it alone. Then suddenly Lyra stepped beside him. "So humans just ignore fear?" she asked shakily. Elias strained against the metal. "No." His muscles trembled violently. "We just move anyway." Together they pushed. The column finally shifted enough for the children to escape. Cale laughed weakly through exhausted tears. "You humans are crazy." Elias smirked despite everything. "Yeah, we hear that a lot." Then the station alarms changed completely. A deep automated voice echoed everywhere. "Core failure in 5 minutes." Everyone stopped. 5 minutes. The reactor was going critical. If it exploded, the entire moon would die. Panic erupted instantly. People ran in every direction. One civilian screamed, "We're dead." Another cried, "No ships can evacuate in time." Cale looked terrified. "Mom can stop them, right?" But Elias already knew the truth. Outside, Seraphine's dreadnought was fighting the assassination fleet alone. The stars beyond the cracked windows burned with constant explosions. She was outnumbered. And losing. Then Elias saw the reactor map flashing on a damaged terminal nearby. An old maintenance route. Direct access to the cooling chamber. His expression changed. "No," Lyra whispered immediately. "Don't even think about it." Elias grabbed a plasma cutter from the emergency wall. "If the reactor overheats, everyone dies." "You can't survive that radiation." "Probably not." Cale's eyes widened. "Human." The station shook again. "Core failure in 4 minutes." Lyra stepped in front of him desperately. "My mother can save the station." Elias looked toward the burning stars outside. "No," he said softly. "She's busy saving you." Then he turned toward the reactor corridor. Alone. And behind him, for the first time in her life, Lyra Vey felt truly afraid for a human. The human walked into the reactor chamber knowing it would kill him. The door sealed behind Elias Mercer with a heavy metallic boom. Inside, the air itself glowed blue from radiation. Warning lights flashed violently across collapsing walls. Steam erupted from broken coolant lines. At the center of the chamber, the fusion core pulsed like a dying star seconds away from exploding. Core failure in 3 minutes. Elias coughed immediately. Blood splattered across his sleeve. Even standing inside the chamber for a few seconds was lethal for most species. But Elias kept moving. Because millions of lives were above him. And somewhere out there, 2 frightened children were waiting for him to come back. Outside the station, space had become a battlefield of fire. Seraphine Vey's dreadnought tore through enemy cruisers with terrifying precision, but the assassination fleet kept coming. Black warships surrounded her from every direction while missiles burned across the stars. One royal guard rushed toward her command throne. "My queen, reactor detonation estimated in under 3 minutes." Seraphine's face hardened. "And Elias Mercer?" The guard hesitated. Still inside the station. For the first time since the battle began, fear appeared in the Crimson Queen's eyes. Back inside the reactor chamber, Elias forced open a maintenance panel with shaking hands. The coolant system was destroyed. The only way to stop the meltdown was manual stabilization. From inside the core. He laughed weakly to himself. "Of course it is." The radiation alarm screamed louder. His skin already burned. His vision blurred. Then suddenly the communicator on Seraphine's beacon activated. Her voice filled the chamber. "Human, report." Elias smiled faintly at the sound. "Still alive. You need to leave immediately." "Can't." The Queen's breathing became sharp. "That reactor will kill you." "Yeah," Elias replied quietly. "I figured that out." For several seconds neither spoke. Outside, explosions shook the station again. Then Seraphine's voice softened into something almost human. "You barely know them." Elias understood immediately. The children. He tightened his grip on the control lever beside the core. "Doesn't matter. You would die for them." Elias closed his eyes briefly. Images flashed through his mind. Lyra laughing while learning human card games. Cale asleep beside the heater wrapped in an oversized blanket. The way they looked at him with trust. Like he was safe. Like he was family. "My daughter died during the mining collapse on Europa," Elias whispered. Silence answered him. "I couldn't save her." His voice cracked slightly. "But maybe I can save yours." On the bridge of the dreadnought, Seraphine stopped breathing. Around her, officers exchanged stunned looks. The most feared woman in the galaxy suddenly looked shattered. Humans are different, she realized one final time. They carried pain like broken stars inside them. And somehow, they still chose kindness. Tears slowly rolled down Seraphine's face. Not from weakness. From understanding. Inside the reactor chamber, Elias reached the final control lock. Core failure in 1 minute. Warning lights became blinding. The chamber temperature rose violently. He placed both hands onto the stabilization wheel and began turning it manually. Nothing happened. The wheel was jammed. Elias strained harder. Metal screamed. His muscles tore under the pressure. Blood ran from his nose. Still the wheel barely moved. Outside the station, enemy warships suddenly broke through Seraphine's defense line. One massive cruiser aimed directly at Outpost K-17. A planet-killer cannon began charging. The Royal Guards panicked. "My queen! We must retreat now." Seraphine stared silently at the station viewport. At the tiny burning structure where one human fought death alone. Then she gave an order that stunned her entire fleet. "All ships," she said calmly, "protect the station." One commander froze. "Even if we lose the fleet?" Seraphine's silver eyes glowed fiercely. "He protected my children." Her voice echoed across every ship in the armada. "Now we protect him." The Vakari fleet turned instantly. Not away from danger. Toward it. Thousands of warships charged directly into the enemy formation like a tidal wave of black fire. Outside, the galaxy witnessed something impossible. The ruthless Crimson Queen risking her entire empire. For one human mechanic. Inside the reactor chamber, Elias screamed with effort as the wheel finally began turning. 1%. 2%. The reactor slowly stabilized. But the radiation became unbearable. His legs collapsed beneath him. Skin burned. Breathing failed. Still he kept turning. Core failure in 10 seconds. 9. 8. His hands slipped in blood. 7. 6. The reactor screamed violently. 5. Elias thought about his daughter. 4. He thought about Lyra and Cale smiling over pancakes. 3. He smiled weakly. 2. And with the last strength left in his body, he forced the wheel fully open. The chamber exploded with blinding white light. Then suddenly, silence. The reactor powered down. Across the station, alarms died instantly. The meltdown stopped. Millions survived. But inside the chamber, Elias Mercer collapsed motionless onto the floor. Far above, Seraphine felt her heart stop. No. Without hesitation, the Crimson Queen abandoned her command throne and sprinted toward the station herself. Royal Guards stared in shock as she disappeared into the emergency corridors. Not as a ruler. Not as a conqueror. As a terrified mother about to lose someone important. Minutes later, the reactor doors finally opened. Smoke poured into the hallway. Lyra and Cale pushed past the guards immediately. Elias. The human lay unconscious beside the silent reactor core. Burned. Broken. Barely breathing. Cale dropped beside him, crying openly. Lyra grabbed Elias's trembling hand. Then Seraphine slowly approached. The feared queen of the Vakari Empire knelt silently beside the dying human mechanic. And in front of her soldiers. In front of her officers. In front of the entire galaxy watching the live battle feeds. Seraphine Vey bowed her head to a human. "The galaxy will remember your name," she whispered. Elias's eyes opened slightly. Weakly, painfully, He looked at the children first. "Hey," he whispered softly. "You two okay?" Lyra burst into tears. And all across the galaxy, millions watching the broadcast finally understood the truth humanity had been hiding for centuries. Humans were not the strongest species. Not the fastest. Not the most advanced. They were something far more dangerous.